What is good, you guys? Welcome back. I initially wanted to post this on the membership channel, but I know this topic is impactful and important, so it needs to be heard by everyone. So let's get into it. Recently, there have been some success stories from subscribers, from clients, and even myself when it comes to shifting from a state where health seems less than perfect to perfect health. I'm going to share 3 health success stories, what it's like to manifest perfect health for strangers, and an amazing success story from a wonderful client who has shifted to a reality where she no longer has cancer. And I want you guys to understand that nothing is out of your reach, and I intend that this video inspires you. So let's get on with it. So, on my community tab, there is a recent success story from a subscriber whose sister in law landed in the emergency room with a hematoma protruding near her navel. After test, it was decided that they needed to perform a specific procedure. This lovely subscriber said upon hearing this news, she decided that her sister in law would not need this procedure, which was not 100% safe. She said she just decided and stuck to her decision no matter what showed up. She said she didn't know how to explain what came over her. She just knew that there was a feeling of knowing. And although her brother kept sending updates, a MRI, CT scan, prep for the procedure, and a sonography, she kept with the conviction, and the hematoma started shrinking on its own, and the procedure was canceled. She did not require it any longer. And she said, I now know we are one consciousness. And the moment I make a decision from knowing who I really am, nothing can stop it from materializing. Only I can come back in the way and stop it. Thank you so much for all that you do for all of us. I have experienced the miracle, and that miracle is me, the creator. And that was a beautiful success story. I will link it down below if you're listening over on the podcast so you can read it. And it is over on the community tab if you are listening over on YouTube. So, this next story is a personal one for me. It makes me so emotional when I think about it. So, my story, this happened last week. My grandmother, which is the only grandmother that I have living, was rushed to the hospital, and she wasn't able to breathe, and they were keeping her overnight. Her levels got so low that the doctor told my mother that the family needed to prepare over the next few days because there was no sight in her getting better or being able to breathe on her own with her pre existing heart condition. Her heart was showing signs of failure. So my mother calls me very frantic, of course, because that's her mother. And she's going on about how she doesn't believe that she will make it and is ushering me to come home to Florida now to help her prepare and jumping ahead about what to do, where she should make funeral arrangements, and all of the things. But within me, I had nothing but a calm presence come over me. I was observing this moment, and I just told my mother that I know for a fact that she will be fine and she will be walking out of the hospital breathing on her own. I did not for 1 second entertain anything else. And after we got off the phone that first time, I immediately went inward and I heard a different conversation. So, what I heard was I heard my mother say that my grandmother was leaving the hospital breathing on her own and that she was actually headed straight to play bingo. Because one thing about my grandmother is she loves to play bingo with her friends. So, me in my imagination hearing that made me laugh because I know from my grandmother, she never lets anything stop her from living her best retired life. So, I knew for a fact that it was done and I let it go. I went on about my day. I went to sleep, and the next 2 days, nothing changed. My mom was still calling me upset, but I stayed with the knowing that I was immovable and I never spoke a word of death. And so I kept speaking life into the situation, telling her that it was impossible for death to occur because I planned to take my grandmother to Vegas to the casino this year for her birthday. We've already been planning it. So I know for a fact that we're still doing that. I already saw it within me. So I was just telling my mother to basically relax, just keeping her on good spirits, right? So we had already talked about it. So I knew for a fact that that's what we were doing. But my mom was still urging me to come home. But I stayed within and I assumed that it was done, right? So on the third day, I didn't hear a word from anyone. No one called me, no one updated me or anything. So on the fourth day, I called my mom just to check on her because I knew that she wasn't sleeping as she had been spending time at the hospital with my grandma. But when she picked up, she told me that she was home sleeping and she said, "You need to call your grandmother. You'll never guess where she is right now." And I just laughed because I knew. I said, "Of course she's at bingo." And we busted out laughing. And she said, "Yes, she got out yesterday. And when I woke up to check on her a few hours ago, her car was gone." She said she's fine and nothing can stop her. And just like I said, I knew I did not for one moment accept the invitation to accept any other reality than the one of perfect health. And that was last week. And I called her and she was joking and saying that I can't leave this world now because you still got to take me to Vegas to the casino. So for me, I just knew it could not be any other way, right? So that is my story for a recent health revision success story. And I'm telling you guys, it literally happened just like I thought it would. And so most people will say that it's easier to manifest for others, and maybe that is true if that is your dominant belief. But this next story proves otherwise. And so I'm going to share the story and I will tell you exactly what she did. So, back in December, I had a client come to me and tell me that she had breast cancer. She was afraid and wanted to know if it was really possible to manifest her not having cancer. And I told her, "You are the all, and all things are possible if you know yourself as source." She was so outer focused on the circumstances and what her doctor was saying, but she decided to shift her focus. They caught the cancer early, but it seemed to be rapid. And so we spoke a few times throughout this process. And she was waiting for an appointment with an oncologist, which was in January. And she took what I share with all of you seriously and shifted her focus. In January, her oncologist said that she would be a candidate for chemotherapy, which she did not want to do. And she was scheduled to start the end of February, but in the meantime, they would run some tests before she got started. She said that she would not be getting chemotherapy, and she knew that she did not have cancer. She did not even want it to get to that point. So, long story short, after applying what we've discussed during testing, they discovered that the cancer was not spreading. In fact, her blood count was normal and her levels were normal, and the lump was shrinking indeed, right? So, her doctor was baffled at the fact that she would indeed not need chemotherapy. And so they held off on chemo and took another biopsy, and the lump was showing signs of it being benign. And she updated me at the beginning of March that this was the result. And last week, she told me that she was indeed cancer free, you guys, and heading to spring break at Disneyland with her grandkids. And when she gets back, we're going to have an interview, and that will be up on my membership channel. So, what did she do, you guys? She told me that there was something that you said in one of our calls that radically shifted my understanding. If all thoughts are memories, including my imagined end, then why do you continue to choose the same memories over and over again? She said it helped me see that it was a momentary appearance that I first accepted, then I chose to unknowingly live there by continuously observing it, right? And so that was the moment when things really changed for her, right? She got this spark within her that was like, wait, I can actually choose different. So, guys, the reason reality can play out as cancer or any condition is because consciously or unconsciously, the person has identified with it. They've accepted the invitation as truth, and then the body and circumstances begin to reflect that identity. And it's not blame, it's unconscious agreement. So, everything is allowed to appear in the mind of the all. But whether you grab on or claim that passing moment as a fact is your choice. And this is where that free will comes in, right? So, upon this understanding now, she had a burning desire to be different. I remember when that shift occurred, she just said, I know I'm going to be different. I know I'm going to choose different. I will not let this take over my life. And she said, I knew when the doctor told me I had cancer, it didn't feel like truth in that moment, but I was scared and accepted it. I played that moment in my head over and over, then wondering about my lifestyle and how the cancer came to be. I made up a story around my health that solidified it even more. And I went home and I researched what to do and went down a rabbit hole of stories about the statistics, and I assumed the worst case scenario. And so I believe that's why it appeared to start to become rapid in my reality. So, what was going on, you guys? Her observation was on what was. It was outer focus, which we've talked about how your outer senses are reactive and your inner senses are creative. If you're constantly looking at the collapsed appearance with intent to change it, remember there is no potential in a collapsed reality or linear time. You must go within. So, why would someone keep choosing a memory that causes suffering? It is because it feels safe, it feels familiar, and even if it hurts, it's known. So, healing, health, and wholeness, that's unknown to the one identified with lack. And wholeness is a leap of faith, right? But once you realize that you're the chooser of the memory, of the identity, it's no longer about fixing something, it is about choosing again, right? Remember, you are not changing what is, you are choosing. So, like we've talked about before, all thoughts are recycled memories. And most people don't realize that they're not thinking new thoughts, they are just looping old data, and the data becomes identity. I am sick becomes I am. It becomes your awareness of being. And that's where the illusion or this distorted reality appears, because we know that there is no lack in the mind of the all. And if you don't interrupt that memory loop, you unconsciously choose it again, because the body becomes addicted to the familiar emotional state, even if it's pain, fear, or illness. So, choosing new thoughts is choosing a new identity. When someone decides, I am no longer living in that memory, they're not denying their current experience, they are refusing to let it define them. So, this shift creates space for a new version of reality to emerge. And as we discussed this, she decided to remember the version of her that was always healthy. And what she said was, I am the version of me who remembers being healthy. That is what she claimed as her statement. And with this realization, she now had that conviction, because she now knows that she is the cause and not the effect, and that she has the power to choose. Neville Goddard has this quote where he says, all transformation begins with an intense, burning desire to be transformed. So nothing changes unless you genuinely want it to. Not a mild preference, not a casual wish, but a deep, consuming desire, a longing so strong that you're willing to let go of who you've been and to step into who you really are. And it's not about forcing change with willpower or manipulating circumstances or the 3D. It is about allowing your imagination and your inner conviction to become so vivid and so dominant that your entire being moves with it. So, true transformation requires an identity death, dying to the old self, right? So, one of the first things that she really did was accept the present without resistance. And we talked about this before. Paradoxically, the first step is not to fight or to resist the diagnosis, but to fully allow the present moment to just be. Resistance, even to something like illness, reinforces that reality. But acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It means no longer identifying with the illness. And when you accept it, you release yourself from the attachment of fighting up against it, or being in conflict with your reality, which is in conflict with yourself as your I am awareness. And you could say something like, okay, this is the current version that I'm observing, but it's not the only version of me that exists. And so then she identified as the version of herself who is already healed. And so most people are stuck in opposition to their current reality by trying to change a reality, fix a problem, or even try to heal. You do not heal cancer or any condition, you guys. You become the version of you where it doesn't exist, and that version already exists. And you may ask, well, how do you do that? Remember, you use your inner senses. Your inner senses are creative. You can't even just decide if your conviction in knowing that you are the source is that strong enough. But remember, creation is finished. So you're not creating healing. You are aligning with the frequency of already whole you. And frequency just means that you are frequently returning to your preferred identity, right? So the next thing is to completely drop the story of being sick. One of the most powerful shifts is letting go of the narrative of being a sick person. And the longer that story is rehearsed, the more the body follows it. So instead of telling the story of lack of sickness, began telling the story of transformation, renewal, divine intelligence in the body, and vitality. And this could sound like, I don't know how, but I know my body is realigning with total wellness. Every cell in my body is obeying the consciousness I choose. Or there are infinite versions of me. I'm choosing the one where I'm healthy, free, and fulfilled. And so what she did was also use revision and imagination. She really used all of her inner senses, but what she did was she revised the moment she found out, because that was the memory she kept returning to. She kept trying to figure out how she got there. She kept trying to make it make sense. And she was dwelling in that moment, unable to move on, so much so that she started to defend it by agreeing that her lifestyle was the cause instead of choosing. So remember, you are not changing what is, you are choosing. And I want to go back to saying that she started to defend that reality, because that is what you do when you keep looking back at what is and remaining in that reality and living in that moment, saying that this cannot be. I have to figure out how I got here. I have to figure out how to feel about this moment before I move on. I have to figure out why this is the reason. And then you start pulling together and stringing things from your past that may be or may not even be the reason why you got there. And you will create a story around it, solidifying yourself living in that moment even more, right? And so she went back to that moment she kept living in and imagined the doctor saying that there was no trace of it. It's benign, right? And then she imagined hearing her daughter say that she is so happy that she is well and that she gets to spend more time with her grandkids. And she also imagined getting healthier, going on walks and working out, taking vacations, hanging out with her grandkids, hanging out with her friends, gardening. So, what she was doing was she chose to experience a full life within her, not trying to manipulate or move things on the outside, but she was experiencing that life within her. And I want to point something out that is key here. If you don't get anything else from what I am saying, it doesn't necessarily matter what you imagine or even what technique you do. It is in the implication. So, behind this imagining or whatever technique you do, what does it imply? What is this inner movement saying about who you are choosing to be? That is what you need to understand. It is saying that I am whole, I am complete, or whatever you are doing. If you're doing the opposite, it will be saying, the implication will be saying, I'm not that. I have to figure out how to get that. You have to go beyond what you are just imagining and say, what is this implying about me, about who I'm being? Is it implying that I am who I'm desiring to be? Or am I choosing that I'm not there yet and I have to figure something out? Right? So the technique itself doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter what you are imagining, it's in the implication, right? So when you persist in this feeling of that new reality, it begins to take form. And know that this brings about a completely different past and future. The you who is healed does not have a past of illness because it never happened to the you that was always healed. That's what you need to understand. So you don't have to worry about what is or what has already collapsed because it's two totally different lives, right? And so, even as all this was happening, she still followed the current timeline. This is how you merge, guys. You still follow what's already collapsed. She followed the timeline. She went to the appointments. And even when the symptoms persisted, she began responding to life as if she were already well, not recklessly, but with conviction. She held her focus and attention with knowing that this is an inner movement. Remember, nothing manifests in the 3D. So she knew her inner world was the true reality. So she stopped watching the outer world and observing what was and started aligning with her choice internally. And there were times where she was afraid and her faith got shaken as the symptoms appeared. And as she felt fatigued, she kept returning to her truth. And even when her daughter wanted to ask her about what her wishes were, if anything were to happen to her, she still returned to her choice. You do not always have to believe because emotions and fear are going to come and go. They're fleeting, they're nothing that lasts. But you, as that I am awareness, is the only thing that is unchangeable. So you just keep returning to your chosen ideal. She said that night after her last test, before she was set to start chemo, she said, I knew it was done. I felt inspired to book a flight to California so I could spend spring break with my kids. I told no one. I just knew. She said that I no longer need the illusion of illness to remind me that I am powerful. What a beautiful way to reframe it, you guys. I want you to really see that is such a beautiful way to see it because that was signaling that she was on the other side. Guys, sometimes we look at the circumstances and feel opposition as something is happening to me, but she knew this was happening for me. So I can remember that I've always been whole. So everything that comes into your awareness, because it's all allowed, is going to be used for you to remember who you truly are. So she was no longer living in that timeline. She moved fully into her I am awareness in that moment. And so now she is on spring break with her kids at Disneyland, knowing that she is in her ideal. She said she is taking more walks and life looks different, feels different. She feels more present and aware, more powerful and unstoppable. That's because she is. And I cannot wait for this interview when she comes back and gets settled again. And that will be over on my membership channel. Guys, you are it. You are the source, and you have all the power to choose. I get the emails. I know many of you are currently experiencing health conditions or circumstances that seem less than perfect. You could apply this to any situation. So I'm going to leave this video here. Thank you to everyone who attended the revision masterclass yesterday. I know this hit differently for your new understanding. So I want to give back to all of you. And what I'm doing in April is hosting a challenge called the Reality Reset. I am doing an amazing giveaways, a few of them, if you participate. It's just a little incentive to make sure that you are taking this challenge seriously. So go check it out. We will have a masterclass on magnetism, daily recordings, and so much more. So think of it as group coaching in challenge form. And there are very limited spots available. So if that interests you, go check it out. Remember, make sure you like, share, and subscribe and keep watching for these gems that we are dropping here. And remember, you guys, remember your imagination is on your side. That is the kingdom. That is the keys. You got the keys already to the kingdom. All right. And I am on your side too. Bye.